Alright, here it is, Easter Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Spent the morning with my family, but some stuff that happened yesterday has basically necessitated me doing a video today. So let's start from a couple days ago. The private autopsy that the family had done for Stephon Clark was released. And oh my god, people lost their friggin' minds. The autopsy shows a total of 8 rounds. The diagram from the autopsy shows a total of 8 rounds striking Stephon Clark. One of them struck him in the left thigh, upper knee area. One hit him in the chest. There's 2 different diagrams. One shows it hitting his left side of his chest. The other one shows it hitting the right side of his chest. Not sure which is the correct version. And then there are 6 rounds that struck him in the well, one, they say the back, but one's actually in the side of his neck. The rest of them start right here on his shoulder, and then they move down towards his spine and lower back. You can see the diagram here, plain as day. It shows where all the rounds struck. This should come as absolutely no surprise to anyone who watched the shooting videos of the incident. Both body cam videos and especially the helicopter flare footage. This should not be a surprise. You can see, and I'm going to let the helicopter flare footage, I'm going to let it play out here in a second, but you can see, and if you watch from where the officer is shooting, after Clark hits the ground, you can see several more rounds being fired.
He's at one further house to 1 yard to the south. 2 minutes trying to catch him. Hi, Coordinator, go ahead. Shots fired. Shots fired.
It is not rocket science to figure out that the rounds being fired from his right side from officers who are standing are going to come in on his right side and possibly his back because of the angle that they're shooting from. People have absolutely lost their minds, and they're completely ignoring all the video evidence that exists. They're saying that the cops went out there and that they shot Clark in his back while he stood facing away from them, and that is utter bullshit. The fact that no one has come out from the police department and disputed that is beyond me. Just they're letting people run rampant with these blatant lies, and it's getting people fired up, and they're going out and they're protesting. So let's talk about a couple things real quick. We talked about the diagram. We saw the helicopter flare footage of the shooting. We've talked about the angle, and here's a drawing. Here's a still shot from the helicopter flare footage, and you can see where the officers are. They're crouched at the corner of the building, and they're firing at Clark, who is now, after he was struck the first time, laying on the ground with his right side to the officers. The bullets are coming from where the cops are, so if you look at the green arrow, the bullets are coming from where the cops are, and they're hitting Clark while he's laying on the ground. It's not geometry, it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery, it's not hard to figure out that the bullets are going to hit him in the area that they struck him. So, moving on about that. From there, people are claiming, or they're screaming still, then this is, I will give them an almost valid point if they don't understand how things work. People are complaining that the cops continued to shoot Clark once he hit the ground. There's a couple reasons that they continued to shoot. Some of it talks about, so if you start looking at the Force Science Institute, they talk about a lot of this. And some of it is perception time, some of it's reaction time. It takes your brain so long, it's about 3/4 of a second, to actually perceive what's going on. In other words, you see something, it takes about 3/4 of a second for your brain to process that and determine what it actually saw. Reaction time's about another 3/4 of a second. And that's for your brain to determine what you need to do now that your brain has figured out what it was you saw. So from the time the shooting started till the time the shooting stops is about a total of 6 seconds, 5 to 6 seconds, depending on when you count the clock, when you start the clock, when you stop it. So it's 5 to 6 seconds. At least a second and a half of that is taken up with the officers. First off, when they determined that they thought he had a gun, it took them a little bit to start shooting. Once they started shooting, it takes, even though they're following him and they see him go to the ground and they continue to shoot, It takes their brains time to process the fact that he is no longer a threat. So people are screaming, well, as soon as he fell on the ground, that he should have stopped shooting, or the cops should have stopped shooting. So let's talk about that. So even if you acknowledge the fact that the cops think he had a gun, let's just assume that if they thought he had a gun and he really did have a gun, just because he's on the ground, some people are complaining that they continued to shoot. So I'm going to point, here's a gun. This is a Glock 19. It's empty. So a couple things about guns for people who don't know anything about guns. This is how people normally hold a gun, right? Gun functions when it's facing up. It's empty. I'm going to dry fire the gun. The gun functions while it's facing up. Look at that. It would have gone off if there was a bullet in it. Gun is sideways. Oh, wow, look at that. Striker still works. Hang on, sideways this way. Striker still works. What about upside down? Yep, striker still works. Guns function no matter, oh, hang on. That way or that way. The gun functions no matter which way the gun is facing. That's the way guns are designed. They're not supposed to not function if they're sideways. Okay, they're designed to function in as many environments as they could possibly make them function in. One of those environments would be laying down. So let's take a quick look at this video that I shot about 15 minutes ago, and you tell me if a gun can still function while laying on the ground. So here I am out of my range, and I'm going to show you why they didn't necessarily stop as soon as he went to the ground. In order to do that, I have to put my hearing protection on. I have a camera directly above the target area. All right, here is my handgun. Cops said they thought he had a gun in his hand. Tell you what, I have a phone here. So from your angle at the camera, the cops said this is what they saw. Somebody pointing something at them. One hand, two hands. You can use the example from the city open meeting. The protester there who's pointing his phone at the mayor, same thing. I'll also include that photo here. So pointing this at you versus pointing this at you, not a lot of difference at night, especially when you got adrenaline going and you're chasing a guy who's running from the helicopter. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so I'm going to face that way because that's downrange. That's where the cops are at this point, right? So he's facing them. I'm going to talk to the other camera here. So he's facing them. He's got something pointed at them. They begin to shoot him. He falls to his left and angles that way. So, oh my God, I fell down. Funny how guns still function when you're laying on the ground. This comes as no surprise to anybody who knows anything about firearms, who's ever done any kind of firearms training. In rifle training, they teach you to shoot prone. That's how you zero your rifle. People can shoot from the ground. People who've been in the military instinctively go to the ground when they start getting shot at versus standing up and going, huh, where's that coming from? They go down low. They go for cover. The cops may have assumed that that's what he was doing. I don't know what they were thinking, but to say that they should not have shot him because he went to the ground ignores everything that people who've done any kind of firearms training know to be true. All right, so I'm going to address some other points from the inside because it's actually a very warm day out here. But that should prove to you that you can shoot while you're laying on the ground. Here, I'll do it again. So I'm walking towards the camera, I get shot, I fall down. It's not impossible to shoot while you're laying down. All right, so you can clearly see that even if you assume that the officers fired because they thought he had a gun, which if you've watched the body cam videos, you know they thought he had a gun. So saying just because he's on the ground they should have stopped firing doesn't hold true. People can shoot while laying on the ground. People are trained to shoot while laying on the ground. Being prone doesn't make you not a threat. So if they thought he had a gun in his hand, just because he now is on the ground doesn't mean he's suddenly not a threat. All right, moving on from that. let's get into what happened last night, which is why I'm shooting this video now. There was we'll call it a vigil, that's what they were calling it, that was organized by some people. And it was held down in the county, Sacramento County area in the South Sac. So the vigil was organized by, or at least one of the organizers was a guy named Jamil Sale. And he said he was holding the vigil in the county because Sacramento County Sheriff's Department needs to be held accountable for its part in Clark's shooting, unlike previous protests that focused on the Sacramento Police Department. Police say a Sheriff's Department helicopter came to help local officers responding to reports of broken car windows nearby. So, Sale goes on to say that, here's read this exact. So, Sale questioned why authorities used a helicopter to respond to what he described as a petty crime. Petty crime is actually in quotes. And he called for the firing of the deputy or deputies in the helicopter that responded to the 911 call leading to Clark's shooting. I'm sorry, what? You want the cops who respond to a in-progress call for service, an in-progress crime, you want those cops to be fired because they, what? Because they responded? You mean someone called 911 and the cops actually came and now you're pissed? This is crazy talk. All right, sorry about that. Had to do change cameras. My other one, the battery just crapped out on me. So, talking about, let me start over here. Okay, so during the vigil, it turned into a protest, and a whole bunch of people, it looked like 40 to 50 people initially, start walking down the street, blocking traffic, blocking cars, vandalizing things. Some of them, not all of the protesters were out there vandalizing things. I will freely admit that, but some of them were. So they end up surrounding two Sacramento County Sheriff's vehicles. Don't know what year they are, but they're both Ford Explorer cop cars. That's important, and I'll talk about why that's important here in a minute. They have all these people that Sacramento Bee is referring to as legal observers. I haven't the slightest clue what a legal observer is. And neither does anybody I've spoken to, at least my friends or coworkers. And I'm assuming that these legal observers are people that have been hired by attorneys to go out and film this whole incident. That way, in case something bad happens and there's a lawsuit later on, they've got ammo for their lawsuit. That's purely a guess on my part, but that's my guess as to what a legal observer is. So these legal observers are filming this whole thing, and this crowd surrounds the two Sacramento County Sheriff's cars that have their lights on. One of the cars, if not both of the cars, have their siren on. The lead car gets on his PA, male voice on the PA says, back away from my vehicle, back away from my vehicle. He says it 4 or 5 times. Eventually people all back away from his car, and he starts to creep forward. The car behind him has people surrounding his car. And I have 2 videos of this. One of them is from KCRA. I take it back. One of them is from Channel 10, which is not KCRA. I don't remember who they are. Channel 10's. It was on their Facebook feed. Live feed off of. They did a live feed for the whole thing that captured some of this incident. The other video was shot by one of these legal observers, and I stole it off of SacBee's webpage. So I'll show you both of those videos, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. Alright, so the Channel 10 video is the first one I'm going to show you. And in this Channel 10 video, you don't see the actual, what preceded the woman from bouncing off the hood, or what preceded the woman bouncing off the hood of the patrol car. You see her bounce off the hood, she lands in the gutter next to the curb. But you don't see what led up to that because the camera angle, they were looking at the lead car and everything that was going on. The important part was actually behind them. You can capture some of the audio and you see what happens afterwards, but that's about it.
So I just witnessed this lady get hit, and I know she was kind of asking for it, and it's just really...
So the video that was shot by the Legal Observer that I took from the SACB webpage, this video, one, has much better audio, and two, captures the actual incident. So let's talk about this. First off, let me play it.
Alright, y'all, we going to stop the boulevard. Y'all trying to run, drop in the way. Okay, y'all trying to let us stop to the way. Alright, let's go. We can see it. It's so right. No justice. No justice. No justice. No justice. No justice. Oh my God.
Alright, so let's talk about this. In this video, the second video, if you don't believe me, rewind this and watch it again. You can clearly hear multiple people pounding on this second cop car. You can hear it repeatedly. I think there's 4 or 5 times you hear a boom on the car. The Sheriff's Department says, and I have no reason to doubt why they would, there's no reason I don't think there's a reason to suggest that they would lie, although of course people are going to claim they lied. The Sheriff's Department says the window, one of the rear windows, was smashed out of that patrol car. You can see the woman who gets hit by the car is standing maybe 1.5 feet in front of the car. The car is at a dead stop. You hear a couple of bangs on the car. It's coming from, my assumption would be the driver's side of the car, because you can clearly see the passenger side of the car and there's no one banging on it. Could be the very back of the car. My assumption is the driver's side. The car lurches forward a little bit, almost strikes that woman, and then it takes off from a dead stop and accelerates up to maybe 5 miles an hour as she gets struck by the front bumper, falls onto the hood, then she slides off to the right side of the vehicle and ends up in the gutter. That is what you can watch, and if you don't believe me, please rewind it and watch it again. That's what happens in this video, okay? There are quotes in the Sacramento Bee who hosted that very video from people who are lying out of their ass, and it just is infuriating that the media puts out what they know is false information. Let me read this quote. "I heard wheels spin, and then I saw her body flung to the curb." Tiffany Russell-Moyer, another legal observer who witnessed the incident, said, "The vehicle sped off and some protesters went after them." Okay, protesters went after them. That's probably why they're not stopping. I know if that had been me and I had just been in that situation where I was surrounded and people were pounding on my car and they broke a window out of it, I ain't coming back. I'm going to go somewhere else and call the cops. Well, this is the cops. So I'm sure they went somewhere else, got a hold of their supervisor and said, "Hey, Sarge, guess what happened?" But beyond that, we know, you watch the video again, please rewind it and watch it again. There is no wheel spin. They're in a Ford Explorer. I work at an EVOC facility. I've worked there for 2.5 years. I'm not on the street anymore. I drove a Ford Explorer in patrol for 2 years before I went to EVOC, where I've been driving one for the last 2.5 years. You cannot make the wheels of a Ford Explorer spin. It has traction control, has stability control. Traction control can be turned off. Stability control cannot be turned off, and neither can the all-wheel drive system. That car will not spin the tires. I can't get them to spin the tires with bald tires in the rain. I guarantee that cop car doesn't have bald tires, and it was not raining. That car did not spin the tires. That car lurched forward at about 5 miles an hour when it struck that woman. This is a blatantly false statement made by Tiffany Russell-Moyer, and the Sacramento Bee published it as if it was fact. They put it in quotes and put it out there. Okay, that's one. Then, let me dig up this other quote here. I have it right here. This is from ABC 10's, I'm sorry, earlier I forgot what channel it is. ABC is channel 10. ABC 10's Facebook page that was part of that video, the first video that I showed you. This is a comment by a guy named Brian Keith Lincoln II. Here is his quote. I will read it to you. "He hit her on purpose, then drove off. We were making room for them to get through. He swerved, jerked all the way to the curb. Felony hit and run. Charge him. He used his vehicle as a weapon against a 60-plus-year-old white woman. Then he goes on and rants some more. He didn't swerve. He didn't hit the curb, didn't go all the way to the curb. There's no hitting her on purpose. He did strike a woman. He did leave. There's a reason why he would have left. I don't see if that had been a private citizen in that same situation, CHP is not going to be pressing charges against them. They were surrounded by people who were busting out their windows. That is absolutely 100% justified use of force to get out of there. Being held against your will. Penal Code Section 236. The protesters surrounded the vehicles and we're not letting them leave. Okay? It's a shame that that woman got hit. Again, this is just like the Stephon Clark incident. It's a shame that somebody got injured. Their actions played a significant role in why they got injured. I want to talk about a couple other things from the ABC 10 video, and I think you can see it also in the video that I took from SACB. And that's these idiot parents who are out there, and they've got children. One of them looks like maybe 4 years old. And these people are walking around with these small children at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night in the middle of the road, blocking traffic. This is absolutely ludicrous. This is not safe, appropriate behavior for a parent. These people should be getting arrested for child endangerment. You are intentionally blocking traffic on public highways with small children. You are putting those children's lives at risk doing this. That is insane. If you want to go out by yourself and attempt to block cars and potentially get yourself run over, have at it. You take your kids out there, you should be going to jail. That is crazy. And, I'm sorry, I forgot to address one more thing. People are making this all about race. You can watch the FLIR footage. Tell me which one of those guys is white, which one's black. One of those cops was white, one was black. Tell me which one was which. You can't, right? Because the FLIR footage is heat signatures. It's not an actual picture. You can't tell skin color from a heat signature. So that's one thing. The 911 caller never identified the race of the person that they were chasing or that he saw breaking into cars. Up until the actual shooting, no one knew what race the suspect was. So people are out there making this all about race and that the cops ran around and they just wanted to shoot the black guy. Well, one of the cops is black. The other one, I don't know what race he is, but he's not black. So they're making this out like these cops are out there just murdering black people. All right, that's my comments on this. My take on the shooting has absolutely not changed. I'm afraid what's going to happen in Sacramento when this shooting is determined to be a legally justified shooting, because I can tell you, in my opinion, it was a legally justified shooting. It's one of those things that we cops classify as lawful but awful. It's horrible that it happened. Sadly, it's going to be found legally justified. The cops were in reasonable fear for their safety based on what they thought they saw. That's the way the law works. Anyway, that's my take. Like it or not, feel free to comment. Keep your comments respectable and they will stay up. If you start saying fuck you racist cops, I will just delete your comments and ban you from my channel, just like I've been doing since my channel started. This is nothing new. So anyway, that's it. Hope everybody has a nice rest of their Easter, and hopefully the week will remain injury free. All the cops out there, watch your partner 6.